Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, mgrahamsews. This video tutorial is for this beautiful bag called the Piper bag, and it's by KMGhandmade. This bag is actually a pretty quick sew, and the best thing about it is that it doesn't require a lot of hardware. You just have these two O-rings, rivets which are optional. I do tell you how you can sew here instead of using rivets, and you have your magnetic snap, but you can also use a cam snap or any other kind of snap that you have, and your zipper, of course. And there is an option for using a metal zipper end, but in the pattern it is written that you can use a zipper tab here. So she does show you how to make a zipper tab for the end of your zipper. But it's great because that it doesn't require a lot of hardware. You may already have everything in your stash and you can just get started right away. Now, before I go on discussing some of the features, I just wanted to mention that this tutorial is filmed like a sew-along. That means no parts are sped up, no parts are cut out, nothing. You see me make everything. So if at any point of the tutorial you don't want to watch a part or you're feeling like it's taking too long, you can just fast forward through or speed up the tutorial. Really use this tutorial as a guide to help you get through the bag. There are times where I do show you how to do something and then I go off camera and sew the second one or third, and that's just because the tutorial is going to be long if I show you everything when there's doubles or triples. I just don't feel that you need to watch me sew something once and then watch me sew it a second, third, or fourth time. So it just helps cut down the time on the tutorial. So when we get to those parts, you can just pause the tutorial, make your second one, and then come back, press play, and continue on. So now let's discuss some of the features of this bag. So first thing you'll notice is the strap is connected with the O-rings here. Now, if you don't have O-rings, there is an option in the pattern for using some rectangle rings and making your strap a crossbody strap, but you could make your strap like a regular shoulder strap instead of making it with this fun fancy way here, and that way there you can use rectangle rings. Because I know some of us don't always have these O-rings on hand, but we do have a lot of rectangle rings or even D-rings, so you'll be able to use those. You'll just want to make sure that the measurement here will fit in your hardware that you are choosing to use. The front of the bag has this cute little pocket with a flap, and it's perfect for your phone. So I'll just show you, and my phone is quite large and it fits inside this pocket and it goes right to the top of the pocket. That's how big my phone is. And then it just closes shut. And as I mentioned, it is a magnetic snap, but you can use a plastic snap, so the cam snaps or the metal snap here. You can use whatever snap you want that you have. I decided to use the magnetic snap because it's hidden, and then the pocket just looks really nice like that. The back of the bag doesn't have anything on it, but you could add a pocket here, another one of these pockets if you want, or if you know how to do zipper pockets, you could add one on the back if you'd like. But it's nice because it gives it a different look if you wear it this way, and then you have a different look when you wear it this way. It's a really wide bag, so it'll fit a lot of stuff inside. And then you have this really nice gusset here that's cinched in the center, and I really like this. This is a new technique that I haven't seen, and it's same thing on the handle. I really like that. Then when we look at the bag, you have a zipper closure, and that helps open the bag nice and wide. So you can see it's a very spacious bag. One side of the bag has this slip pocket, and the other side has a zipper pocket. So you can keep your items inside nice and organized. Say you have something that you don't want loose in the bottom of your bag, you can put it in the zipper pocket or the slip pocket. Now I wanted to mention this bag is finished with a birthing method and binding, so you get to do the two methods. So if you haven't done binding before, this is a great bag where you'll get to try to do binding. So this top part of the bag here, this part, is done with the birthing method, and then inside the bag you can see is bound. So you get to do the two methods, and it's just this bottom part of the bag here is bound. And I like the binding because it does help hold the bag up, it does give the bag some structure, and all I used was fusible fleece, and as you can see, my bag is standing up really nice. So it's not falling over like it normally would with fusible fleece because that binding is acting like a skeleton to help hold the bag up. It's a really fun bag, and it honestly didn't really take very long. I know the tutorial may seem like it's long, but it doesn't take long. And the only reason why the tutorials are long is because I really go into detail and I explain everything, but this really doesn't take long to make, and it's a really fun sew. I quite enjoyed making this, and I love how different the bag design is in the look. I love how it looks like the two pieces here, how they crisscross each other sort of like that. I really like it. It's a beautiful bag, and I think you're going to really enjoy making this, and then I think you're going to really enjoy taking this out and showing it off to everyone. So let's get started making our Piper bag. So the very first thing you'll want to do is read through the entire pattern. This is very important because oftentimes designers give different information regarding different materials you're using and different interfacings. So it's very important to read through because maybe depending on the material you're using, you may need to use a different interfacing, or you may need to cut a pattern a different size because of the material you're using. So it's important to read through and make note of these so that when you go to cut your material, you cut everything to the correct size and the correct way. It's also important to read through because it familiarizes you with the pattern. So you'll know how the construction of the bag is going to go so that as you're going through the steps, you already know what's coming up. So it sort of helps make sense so that when you get to a step, if you're a little bit stuck, you may think, oh yeah, I remember a few steps ahead, this is what we're doing, so that's why we're doing it this way. So that's very important. So before you begin, read through the pattern, make any notes that you need depending on the materials that you're using. So here I'm using quilting cotton and some soft vinyl. So I've gone ahead and chosen my interfacing based off that. Also with this pattern, it's very important to read it because she does give lots of information regarding different interfacings to use based off domestics or industrial, or the way you want your bag to stand when the bag is finished. So do you want a more casual bag? Do you want a more firm bag? So these are the things that Kristen does talk about in the pattern. So for me, I want more of a casual slouchy bag. So I'm using a fusible fleece for my interfacing rather than a foam or a Decoville light. I'm choosing the fusible fleece. So definitely choose the interfacing that you want to have for the look of your finished bag. Once you've read through everything and you've gotten all your pattern pieces cut out and all your materials cut out, you can gather all your hardware, which I did here, and I've cut my zippers to length. I know what the length is that they need to be because, again, I did read through. So I like to keep it all in a little bag so it keeps it all together. Another thing I've done besides attaching my interfacings is I've made some marks. So for example, on this piece, I made the mark for excuse me. I made the mark for where my magnetic snap is going to go. I was trying to hold in that sneeze and it just didn't go. I've made the mark for that. I've also made a mark down the center of my slip pocket trim, and I've made some other markings as well. So for example, here on this pattern piece, on the lining piece, I made a mark at the bottom for where my slip pocket is going to go. And the reason why I've made some of these markings with the measurement is because I don't show any rulers, pattern pieces, no measurements are given, no nothing on camera. And that's for the protection of the designer, but also because sometimes during testing, which is when I film, some things can change. So a measurement may change or placement may change. So if I don't give these measurements to you, my tutorial is not affected if a change does happen. So you will need to have your pattern open beside you or on the device that you are watching this tutorial on. Another thing I've done, you'll notice here, is I've also labeled what each pattern piece is with the pattern piece letter. And here is my zipper pocket. I've already gone ahead and made the zipper pocket window that we need to draw. So besides having all that done, again, I do mark what each pattern piece is. That just makes it easier when we get to those steps. Oh, now I've got everything flipped around. When we get to those steps, so I know exactly which pattern piece I'm grabbing, I don't have to kind of rifle through everything. Another thing I do is I like to put everything in order of how we're going to use them. That's just a preference because when I'm filming a tutorial, then I'm not digging through my pile on the side trying to find things. So I kind of have them in order of how we're going to use them and construct it in the bag. So now that we've gotten that all out of the way, we're ready to get started making our bag. So the first piece you need is your slip pocket F piece, which will look like this. If you haven't already, fuse your Decoville light to this piece, which I have done already, and you're fusing it centered as well as away from the edges as given in the pattern. Once you have that, there's a mark you need to make from the long side edges over towards the center. So you're measuring from the long raw side edge over towards the center, and you're going to make a mark. Once you make that mark all the way across, so a line all the way from the top to the bottom, so you'll see I have it there, you're going to fold the raw edge in to meet that mark, and you're going to do that on both sides. Then what you do after you have it folded in and pressed, which I've already done, if you're using a material that you can't press for your slip pocket, just use a piece of double-sided tape right against the edge of the line and fold it over to the line, and that'll help hold it in place. I've used quilting cotton, so I've already pressed it. I did that so that I didn't have to stop the tutorial as soon as we start the tutorial. Now what we're going to do with this slip pocket, with both your long edges folded in, we're going to fold it so the short raw edges meet. and then we'll clip it in place. So I'm going to clip it along the top and the sides, just to help hold everything together. And you can fold that Decoville light so that it creases as well in the center, and if you really want, you could take it and press it with your iron. You want to make sure those edges match up. So now that we have it all clipped, we're going to stitch along the top using the seam allowance given in the pattern. This is just a basting stitch. That's just going to hold it together. Now we need to grab some double-sided tape and our slip pocket trim piece, and that's D. And we're going to place some double-sided tape along the edges of the slip pocket trim. So along the long edges. It's always a game of find where the end is of my double-sided tape. So just place some double-sided tape along it. Remove the paper backing, and then you're going to place the raw edge of your slip pocket on top of the trim, and not right in the center. You want it just down from the center, and the reason is because when you put it right at the center line, that does add bulk there, and then this won't fold over evenly. So you want to get it centered, but you want to line up those, oops, it's sticking to my fingers. You want to line up, I shouldn't have taken the tape off, the backing off that one. It's going to keep sticking to my fingers. I'm going to do this. Doesn't want to stick back down. There we go. Okay, now I can hold it. So again, leave a little gap between the center of the slip pocket trim. So my center of my slip pocket trim is right here. So I'm leaving a little gap between the top of the pocket and the slip pocket trim center, so that when I fold it over, you'll see the bulk here from the slip pocket helps take up some of that space, and then that makes it so that your slip pocket trim folds over evenly on both sides. And then just press it over. So that it looks like that. So you'll notice on both sides here, my slip pocket trim raw edges line up on both sides. Now we're going to top stitch the edge of this slip pocket trim. And you want to catch both sides of your slip pocket trim. So change to your top stitch length that you like to use. And for this trim, you want to make sure you're using a non-fraying material. Now, you can use a double fold binding, so you can make your binding if you know how to make it. And I do have a little tutorial about binding a bag, but basically with binding, you're folding it the way we fold a strap, and then you're just taking it so that it goes over so there's no raw edges. So you can use a binding to go over this if you want to use quilting cotton for this step. You can use quilting cotton. Again, you just need to make binding so that there's no raw edges. And you want to make sure that you fold in these edges on this side as well, on the edges, so there's no raw edges there as well. So you fold them in the same way we make a strap, then fold the long edges in to meet in the center, and then you will have no raw edges, and you can just place it over top like we did with this. I hope that makes sense. Now we're going to take this and put it to the side. I'm going to remove the clips on the side here. I just don't want them falling off. And we're going to put this to the side for now. That's how it looks when it's all top stitched on both sides. And when I place this in my bag, I'm going to place it so that this side is on the outside or facing out, because this is the right side up and that's the wrong side there. Now we're going to grab our exterior foam pocket flap C pieces, and my C, I wrote it upside down. That's okay. We need to take the two pieces and place them right sides together and sew around the entire edge. However, I'm using a magnetic snap for my pocket, or for my snap. I need to install that magnetic snap now before I sew these together. So we're going to do that really quick. And I'm going to install the male half of the magnetic snap. Grab all my supplies to use to do this. There we go. Okay, so here's how I install a magnetic snap. However, you should follow your manufacturer's instructions, but here's what I do. I take my washer and I line it up with the mark I made for the magnetic snap placement, or for the snap placement. Then using my seam ripper, cut the slits. Now I want to show you a little trick, and I know I show this in almost every tutorial, but I wanted to show a little trick. To prevent my seam ripper from going any further than the slits that I've drawn, I go with my needle in through the top of the first slit and out through the top of the second slit, just like that. Then when I seam rip, my seam ripper won't go any further than where that needle is, or pin. It stops it from ripping any further than the mark I've made. Now we're going to take our magnetic snap, push it through the slits we made. I don't know why it won't go through the other way. If you're not using a magnetic snap, you won't install this just yet. If you're just using a regular snap, you'll do that after the whole bag is constructed. Just need to cut a small scrap of interfacing. Just make sure that small scrap of interfacing that you use stays out of your seam allowance. So I put the interfacing, then my washer, and then I fold my prongs over. And I'm going to use a small piece of tape to cover my prongs. There we go. Now we can continue with placing these right sides together. Clip it all the way around. And again, that's only if you're installing a magnetic snap, you'll do what I just did. Because once this is all stitched together, it's kind of hard. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's kind of hard to get in there and install that magnetic snap. Now we're going to stitch around from the top edge here, the top long edge, down the side, around this curved edge and bottom curved edge, around the side curved edge, and back up this other straight side. We're not stitching this long straight top edge. Use the seam allowance given in the pattern. And take your time. Now, if you have a hard time with these curves, a little trick is to stop with your needle down, lift up your presser foot, pivot your fabric a bit, take one stitch, with the needle down again, lift up your presser foot, pivot the fabric a bit, and take one stitch, and keep doing that all the way around till you get all the way around that curve and get a really nice curve. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to just use our pinking shears and trim around the curve. And you'll notice that my interfacing is not in the seams at all, which helps keep the bulk out of those seam allowances. So I've trimmed all around, and that'll just help turn it out. I'm going to use my turning tool to help turn out those rounded edges. Now, if you've used a material that you can press with your iron, you can definitely take this to your iron and go give it a press. I've used this soft vinyl for this. So I need to use some clips to help keep it pressed so that I can top stitch this whole thing. Of course, it's going to fight me. All right. Now remember, if you've installed your magnetic snap, you got to be careful when we're top stitching that you don't hit that. Also, if you've used a magnetic snap and you have quilting cotton, you want to be careful when you're pressing the quilting cotton because you don't want to hit your magnetic snap because that can demagnetize it. Again, top stitch length to the length you like to use. And we're top stitching all the way around. And same thing I said about the curve before, you can take it one stitch at a time. And if you have a hard time getting around that magnetic snap, you may want to change to a zipper foot, because a zipper foot is skinny and it'll get nice and close without hitting that magnetic snap. Oops, didn't cut anything there. So I'm just cutting all my threads. We don't want those peekaboo threads. And that's how the, sorry, I always go this way and it's over this way. That's how the flap looks when it's all top stitched on both sides. So you have the back and the front. So this is the front, this is the side that'll stick out. And I used a contrasting thread because I just liked how it looked. That's why I picked blue, because I'm using blue vinyl as well, but I thought on the parts where the white is, it'll really help it stand out, which really makes me excited. So now that that's done, we're just going to put that to the side for a moment. We need to grab our pocket E lining and one of our top A pieces. And you want to pay attention to the one that she's using in the pattern for which way this piece here that sticks up is facing. So you want to make sure you're following the pattern and looking. And this is the piece that I have, the side when I have it facing right sides up. This piece that sticks up here, which is where our strap will get attached after, is on the right side. Excuse me for a minute, I'm just going to pause because I need to blow my nose. Sorry about that. I didn't want to keep sniffling and driving everybody, including myself, nuts. All right, so again, the piece that sticks up, you want it to be on the right side. Pay attention when you're doing the construction of the bag to which way that piece is facing so that you don't get everything turned and facing the wrong way for when we go to finish constructing the bag. Now you're going to take your top A, place it right sides up, and you're going to place your foam pocket lining E right sides down so that the top edge is aligned across the top as shown in the pattern. And it says you're going to place your flap over top to make sure that it will fall within the seam allowance. So I've lined this up. So I've taken it and I've placed it on top and I'm lining it across. So I'm just going to put a clip so you can see how it looks. So that's how it looks with my piece attached. And then when I place my flap on, you want to make sure that the flap is centered, and I'm just looking at the picture, that the flap will be centered, and part of it does get cut off. If you look, part of your flap does get cut off over here, and that's okay. It'll get cut off later. Don't cut it yet, but part of it will get trimmed off right here. We'll be trimming that off when we come down around this side. So if you look, that's exactly what she has in the pattern. So I'm going to remove the flap for now. So you're just checking. Make sure that you center your flap on your pocket and see if it is the way it looks in the pattern. So again, that's how I placed my fabric. And I'm going to pin this and just make sure, I'm just double checking to make sure that everything is going to look good. Yep. And I'm just going to make sure with the pictures, it's always best just to double check, double check, double check. Yeah. So that's how it's going to look. So I'm going to remove the flap, keep the pin again still on the fabric here. So clip it in place. Now what we're going to do is, if you haven't already, you need to make the marking for this zipper window. Once you have that marking made, you can stitch the window all the way around and use a slightly smaller or shorter stitch length than you usually use for stitching your bags together. And if you're worried about angled stitches in the corner, what you can do is bring your stitch length down to a 0 when you get to that corner. Take one stitch, then return your stitch length back to the length you use for stitching, and do that in every corner, and that'll help prevent those angled stitches in the corner. Now that we have that stitched, just like that, we're going to take our seam ripper, not a pen. I keep grabbing the same pen. Seam ripper, not pen. And we're going to create a hole in the center. We'll start cutting a hole. Then we'll take our scissors and cut the rest of the way, and then we'll cut little V's into the corner. I like to say little Y's because that's what it looks like when you look at it. I'll show you. Now don't be afraid to cut into the corners. Just be very careful when you're cutting into the corners that you don't cut your stitches. So first, that's what I mean by it looks like Y's. If I pull this up, you see how it looks like a Y? I just find it looks like a Y. So I've cut those little triangles or little V's in the corner. Now, when you're cutting, don't be afraid to go into the corners. Just be very careful to cut your stitches, or not cut your stitches. If you do cut your stitches, don't panic. You can start down here or at the top, whichever side, just somewhere away from the corner. Start right on top of the previous stitches, back stitch, then stitch all the way across, get to the corner, pivot, go up across your corner, and come back across the top or the bottom wherever you've started, opposite of where you started, and back stitch again on top of those previous stitches. The reason for top stitching or back stitching right on top of those previous stitches is it locks in these stitches that you've done previously, but then what you're doing is you're also restitching that corner again. So you're solving two problems. You don't want the rest of your stitches that you've stitched previously because you've cut them to come undone, and you're restitching up that area that you broke the stitches. So that's what you can do if you accidentally cut stitches in any of those corners. And I've done it plenty of times, and every time I do it, that's what I do to fix the problem, and no one ever knows. Now we need to push the lining through to the wrong side. So I like to finger press this first. I just fold it back onto itself and I finger press it. Just helps push it through nicer. Push it through to the wrong side. And then what you can do is take this to your iron and give it a really good press. And I'm going to go to my iron and press this really carefully to make sure that I don't hit my vinyl at all, because I don't want to burn it. But that's what it looks like. We've got it pressed through to the wrong side. And another thing, if you're getting little puckers in your corner when you flatten it out, it could be because you didn't snip into the corners far enough. So you can just snip a little bit more just so that you get nice flat corners. So I'm going to pause the camera. I'm going to take this and press it with my iron carefully, and then I will come back and we will continue on. The other thing I wanted to mention, when I press these pockets into the wrong side, I like to spritz with a bit of water. That just helps sort of press it nice and flat for me. So I'm going to go do that, and then we will come back and continue on. All right, so now I have that pocket pushed and pressed to the wrong side. So it looks like this on the wrong side and looks like that from the right side. And it kind of, the way it folds with this white vinyl is it gives it a nice little, like, almost accent trim around that pocket. I like it. It kind of acts like a window and a frame of a window. Now we need to grab our exterior foam pocket flap piece that we top stitched and put together earlier, and we're going to slide it through this zipper window opening that we have here. Or not zipper window, it's a foam pocket flap, sorry, it's not a zipper window. I keep calling it a zipper window. But through the window opening, and you're going to slide it up until it meets the top edge of the pocket on the wrong side. Clip it together. So those two top edges, so the top edge of the pocket and the top edge of the pocket lining, the flap will meet just like that. So on the wrong side, see how they meet at the top raw edges, and that's how it looks on the right side. Now you're going to take your other lining pocket piece and you're going to place it right sides up. Then you're going to take this piece that you just attached the flap to and place it so that it is right sides together with that pocket piece that you just placed down on your table. Line up those top edges, clip it in place. So all those top raw edges all the way across here are being clipped together and clipped in place. Just like that. So you have a flap, then you have the opening, which leads to your first pocket and then your second pocket lining piece. And mine seems a little bit off, so I'm just going to adjust. At the end of the day, it doesn't really make a huge difference, but just to make it look nice. Now, increase your stitch length to the stitch length you like to use for top stitching, because now what we're going to do is flip this bottom E piece that we just clipped out of the way, just like that. Now what we're going to do is top stitch around this opening. So you want to start on the side, go down, pivot it and go across the bottom, pivot, come across that short edge at the side, and then pivot and go across the top. Now, we're not going to back stitch. We're going to leave long thread tails. However, I will note that if you're using a material that's kind of busy or a thread that matches really well and you won't see, you can definitely go ahead and backstitch if you want. But the backstitching here, no backstitching here, just helps prevent that extra stitching that we have in that area. And usually I stitch. I'm just trying to figure out how I stitch. I'm all confused right now. And I can't get there because this clip is in the way. There we go. Okay. So no back stitching, start at the top. So I start with my needle down. I have long thread tails. Now I'm going to need to take a bit of a shorter stitch here just to get to the length that I need. And you can do the same thing. Sometimes to get an accurate seam allowance, we have to take a stitch that's slightly smaller. Now this is going to be on the front of your bag, so you really want to make sure your stitching looks marvelous. Now I'm at the top here, so I'm going to pivot and I'm going to sew across the top, and I'm moving my clips that I have because they're kind of in my way. Now, if your machine is struggling because of all the bulk, you can use a humper jumper. You can also try a bigger needle or a walking foot. Oftentimes when I switch to a bigger needle, that helps. So I'll switch to a bigger needle and then I'll adjust my tension. And oftentimes that does the trick right there. So I'm back where I started. I'm going to lift up my needle, pull my thread so I get long thread tails, and then I'm going to pull them through and tie them off in the back. So you pull on them and it creates a little loop that comes up in the back, and then you can just pull them through to the back, just like that. So now we have no threads, you'll see in the front, no back stitching either. So I'm just tying them together, put them in pairs and tie them together, and the nice thing is nobody will ever see this knot because it's going to be hidden after in the bag in between everything. Just be careful too when you're pulling your threads that you don't pull too hard. I've had this happen many times where I pull too hard and it breaks the thread, and then I have to unpick stitches. I have to go back many stitches, unpick them, and then pull those threads through, tie them off, and then restart again, pulling threads through and tying them off. We're going to flip that foam pocket piece back down, clip all your edges together, and now we're going to stitch around all the edges of this pocket. And as soon as I get this clipped, I just want to show you how it looks from the right side. And when we're stitching, we want to make sure we move the A piece out of the way. But so far, that's how it looks from the right side. And you have your little pocket here, and you can see it, and it's really cute. So now I'm going to stitch my pocket closed using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And you're stitching through all the layers except for A. And oops, I'm just going to back stitch there. Because of A, it kind of pushed my, it's doing it again, kind of pushed my presser foot over. I should have used a zipper foot there, but I'm not super concerned. And I'm just going to sew up this second side. Yeah, it's doing it again a little bit there. That's okay, no one's going to see that when the pocket is, when we're done constructing our bag, no one's going to see how that looks. As long as your cell phone can fit in. So let's try my cell phone. I kind of have a brick for a cell phone. But my cell phone fits. As you can see, we have our pocket all closed all the way around. And my cell phone, it like comes right up to the top. Oh, I just dropped my phone. Put it back where I had get it. There we go. So that's how that looks. Now we need to trim the pocket here on the corners so that it gets it out of the seam allowance, so that it's the same as the shape of A. And when you do that, after you trim it, you may want to re-stitch because you are going to be breaking some or cutting stitches, or at least I will. So I'm going to re-stitch that area where I cut. And I'm trimming it away from the seam allowance, just getting it out of the seam. I only cut a little bit of stitches. There we go. So I'm going to re-stitch. Probably going to give me issues here. Should probably use. No, I'm good. I just want to make sure that the stitches that I cut previously, or cut there, and the stitches that I stitched previously don't come unstitched on me. But I also want to make sure I get rid of all that bulk at the top, especially if you have a machine that struggles with bulk. There we go. So I mean, it doesn't look the prettiest, but it is out of the seam, it is out of the way, and I should still be able to top stitch with it right out of the way when we go to attach this all together. I guess when we get to that point, we're going to keep our fingers crossed, but I should still be able to top stitch. But that's how it looks when you have your pocket all installed. And now what we need to do is we need to make the mark for where that other half of our snap is going to go. So remember, we have a snap here that we installed on our pocket flat. Now we need to make the mark for where the snap needs to go. And if you're using a magnetic snap, you're going to have a bit of a different way you install it. If you're using a snap, like a cam snap, again, yours is going to be a different way that you install it. Follow your manufacturer's instructions for installing your snaps. So I'm going to install my magnetic snap. I'm going to install the second half the same way I installed the first half. And all I'm doing is pressing my snap down to create that mark for where the snap goes. So I push it down, and then that center of the male half gives it a little mark, creates like a little circle, and I can see it, and then I just draw it. It's a nice way to install a snap because then you make sure, then you're sure that it's going to be in the correct place. And I'm just being careful with my seam ripper. Oops. Again, I'm using a scrap of interfacing. Push the prongs through. My washer, and need my pliers. That's not pushed down enough. There we go. Just threw my pliers into the trash. My poor cart here is such a mess. Hard to stay organized when you're just grabbing at things while filming. A little piece of tape. we go. So I have installed my snap, the other half of the magnetic snap. Let's check it out when we put our phone in. Again, let's just see how it is. There it is. We have our phone pocket all done. I'm just putting my phone away. It's a really cute little way to install the that magnetic snap. I keep trying to force it. Like I look to see that I'm snapping it right, but it just goes automatically. See? I like that sound. Okay, so now we're going to place this to the side with our slip pocket piece that we have already created. We need to grab our recess zipper, and you'll want to cut it to the length given in the pattern. Then you need to make a mark at one of the top edges, and you're going to fold it at that mark. So fold it so that they are, hang on, zipper tape, fold it right sides together at that mark you make. And then you're going to sew a diagonal line from the outside edge to the corner of the teeth as shown, and then you're going to repeat on the other side. Then you'll fold back the tape and you should have a perfect 90-degree angle on the open end of your zipper. Now, I do have a tutorial for how I do this myself, so I do this a little bit differently. So whatever method you have for turning your zippers, please use that method. I'll use the method here that's given in the tutorial, so fold it right sides together at that mark. And so from the corner to corner, trying to grab a pin. So you're sewing diagonally from the bottom corner up to the top. Hold these teeth, they want to go back the other way. And then I'll show you how it looks. A little bit tricky because this is a method I don't usually use, but I will post a tutorial for how I usually do this. But that's how it looks when it's done. So I hope you can see that. So it just folds back onto itself after. It naturally wants to spring back up and fold back up onto itself after. That's the front, that's the back. And it's kind of reverse of how it usually looks, how I usually do it. It's kind of reverse the way it looks here. Again, if you have a method that you prefer to use, please do use that. It's just turning your zipper at a 90-degree angle. That's all you're doing. For this tutorial, I'm just doing it the way she has written. My zipper wants to move, so I'm just trying to hold it. And I'm not really crazy about this, I'm not going to lie. So I'm going to unpick this side because it doesn't look very good. And I'm going to fix it because this side isn't looking very nice. So I'm going to go in off camera and I'm going to pick this apart because this side didn't go as nice. And I think I'll unpick the other side and do it the way I usually do, just so that they both match, because for some reason this side isn't going as nice as the first side did. You can use, like I said, whatever method you prefer for doing your zippers at a 90-degree angle, whatever method, excuse me, you're comfortable with. So I'm going to go fix this off camera and then I'll come back and we will continue on. Alright, so I have got my ends turned at a 90-degree angle. I kept trying that second side to do it the way in the pattern. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it to go as nice as I could the first side, so I just unpicked both and did it the method that I usually use. Still results in the same thing, you just have a different method, that's all. So use whatever method you're comfortable with. Now what we're going to do is take each of our recessed zipper gusset pieces, and on the wrong sides, we need to make a mark in from one of the short edges. So from one of your short edges in, and I've already made that mark so you can see it there in white. So if you're using quilting cotton, you can do as I did and press it to that line. If you're using vinyl like I am on this, you're going to want to use some double-sided tape to help hold those edges down. So we're folding it to meet that line that we made from the short raw edge. So remove the paper backing and fold those short raw edges in to meet that line. You can even do this with quilting cotton if you want. Use double-sided tape. So we folded them in to meet that line. So there's the two in the vinyl and there's my two in quilting cotton, folded in and pressed. Now what we're going to do is take one of our exterior recessed zipper gussets, place it right side up, and then we're going to place our teeth of our zipper tape right side down along the top edge, and the angle that we turned under a 90-degree will come in from the side short edge using the measurement given in the pattern. So I've already made that mark, so I'm going to place it there. The teeth line up with that mark I made. And then we're going to pin it down. And you'll notice I don't have my zipper pull on yet. You don't want to install it. Leave your zipper pull off. And I do have a tutorial on my YouTube channel for how we can install a zipper pull using my handy zipper helper. You can also use a zipper jig if you have one, or the traditional method without the zipper helper. But my zipper helper is just a fork attached to a piece of wood. So that's how it looks. I've come in from the edge as given in the pattern, the measurement. Now I'm going to stitch this down. You can use double-sided tape, but I like to baste this. I like to baste wherever I can so that I'm not using up so much double-sided tape, because double-sided tape is not really cheap. So I'm just basting this down. She does say to use double-sided tape in the pattern. Again, I'm just using a basting stitch. So I've got that down. So the zipper is right sides together with my exterior. Now I'm going to take one of my linings and sandwich that zipper in between. So line up the short raw edges, line up your folded edges, and then clip along that top edge. So we have it clipped all the way across. So now what we're going to do is sew up this short raw edge and then across the top of the zipper. And you're going to use the seam allowance given in the pattern for when you sew that. So you're starting on this edge here, right at the bottom, coming up the raw edge and then across the zipper using the seam allowance given in the pattern. I'm going to back stitch in this corner here. that just adds that extra security, because I'm all about extra security, especially when we're poking out corners later. And remember, you're stopping your stitching here, not right on the end. And if you have to refold the lining a little bit to make sure that everything lines up, go ahead and do that. That's just an adjustment that I'm doing right now. And I'm stopping, not right on the end, kind of halfway through that folded edge. Trim your corner. Careful not to cut your stitches. And then we're going to turn this right sides out. I'm going to carefully poke out my corner using my turning tool. Then I'm going to clip all my edges together. And I'm not going to press and top stitch this just yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the other side, then I'm going to take this to my iron and press everything, and I'll press from only the lining side because I can't press on this side because it is vinyl. Well, I could, I have a Teflon sheet I could use, but I'm going to press from the lining side, and then I will come back and I will top stitch. So I know it's not the order that's given in the pattern, but it just, for me, rather than changing and top stitching and then changing my length and getting up and down a couple times, this here just means that I only have to get up once when I go to press. So that's how that looks so far. Now we're going to repeat that whole thing for the second side. Excuse me, allergies are acting up. You can tell spring is here. So again, I'm pinning it so that the zipper teeth are right sides together with the right side of the exterior, lining everything up. And then I'm going to baste it all in place. Again, you can use zipper tape, a double-sided tape as given in the pattern on the zipper. I'm just using a basting stitch. And then my lining on top, lining up those raw edges. And the folded edges. Clip it all in place, and then we'll sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. I'm just going to move that side out of the way so I don't accidentally stitch it. Trim the corner, turn it out, and then I will take this and press this with my iron. So I'm going to go do that off camera now, and then when I come back we will continue on with constructing our bag. So again, I'm just turning this out, carefully poking out that corner, and then I'm going to add my clips and I'm going to press this all nicely. I think I need to trim some more bulk there. Press this all nicely so that it can be top stitched. And if you have to, you can do like me and just trim a little bit more. That corner didn't want to turn out as nice, so sometimes we have to help it by removing some of the bulk. So again, I'm going to take this to my iron. I'm going to give it a really good press all the way around, and you can see how it lines up nicely when it's closed. Everything lines up, looks great. And then we'll come back and we will top stitch and continue on with making our bag. All right, so now I'm ready to top stitch my zipper panels. So we're going to top stitch up the side edge, come across this edge under the zipper, back down the other side, and then we'll also baste the long raw edges together too. So put your stitch length to the length you like to use for top stitching. Let's see. Saw a thread, I thought I did, but I think it was just a loose thread. So we're pivoting here, we're going under the zipper right now. Now normally you would have done this after each side was done. I'm doing it all at once just because I find it's easier for me so that I don't have to get up twice after pressing panels. And now we're going to baste stitch this bottom edge together. Trim my threads after. And now the other side. Now if your zipper is starting to separate, that's okay because we're going to actually pull it apart in a second here. So don't worry if it's starting to separate on you. So now I'm going to trim all my threads. We don't want those peekaboo threads. Now, what Kristen instructs us to do is put your zipper pull on. I'm just going to scroll so I can follow through the pattern. Install the zipper pull. And I'm just using my handy zipper helper here. And I will link the tutorial for how I use this. There we go, keeps it all straight. Now we're going to find the center of our zipper panels. So once your pull is on, fold it in half so the folded edges all meet, and then mark the center. This is very important because in one of the steps that are coming up, we need to center the zipper panel on our main panels. So you want to have the zipper panel centered. And I'm using my pencil within the seam allowance. And I'm just going to double check everything lines up nicely. There it is. And having the zipper installed just helps keep everything together and even and straight, because if you do it without, you're not sure if you have your zipper installed on correctly and if everything will line up. You could do it without the zipper, but it just really makes that extra secure, extra sure that everything is going to line up in the end. So I took my pull off. You want these separated. They're going to be separated later, so you do want them separated. So separate them now, and you could put a clip on it to help hold them together so you don't lose one. Now we're going to move on and we're going to grab our base, and that is piece H. And there's two of them. You want the lining and the exterior. You're going to place them right sides together, lining up those short edges. And then we're going to sew this using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Make sure it's not twisted when you're clipping the ends. So now I'm going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Don't forget to return your stitch length back to the length for stitching your bag. You don't want to use a top stitching length here. go. Trim your threads. And now we want to open up the seams. And you can use some double-sided tape here to help hold the seams. So that's what I'm going to do, because we want them pressed open. You know what? We're top stitching. I'm not going to use double-sided tape. We're going to top stitch sorry, we're not top stitching those. So we will use double-sided tape. Sorry, I was just reading a wrong paragraph. Sorry for confusing you. Okay, so I'm using double-sided tape to help hold these open. We're going to press them open. Just like that. And I'm just using double-sided tape to help hold it open. It'll just be a lot easier. Double-sided tape likes to stick to me, usually to my nails, and then it peels off part of my nail polish, which it has done already. All right, so they're pressed open. So you can see I've pressed my seams open and I'm using double-sided tape. Now, there's a measurement we need to make from the long edges here up, and then from the middle of the seam over. So you'll need to make those marks, and then you're going to sew along those mark lines, but we're going to make it so that it is an oval. So when you get to the corner here, you'll kind of make it an oval, and I'll show you. So I'm going to go off camera, I'm going to make all those measurements and all those marks, and then I'll come back and show you, because then what we're going to do is we're going to actually stitch on top of those marks. So I'm going to go make those marks, and then we will come back. All right, so I've made those marks, and I just want to show you what I did. So you fold it so the raw edges meet, the long raw edges. When you draw your lines, you're drawing them on the edge that is folded, not the raw edge, the folded edge. So you see the folded edge. Then I drew the lines, made the marks, and then I kind of made them go rounded in the corners to sort of give it more of an ovalish shape. And I'll stitch that down. So now I'm going to stitch it, and make sure you're using your stitch length that you use for stitching your bags together. And don't forget to back stitch at start and stop. And I'm just following along those lines, sort of ish, trying to give it more of an oval shape here. Don't like how that went, so I'm going to fix this one side. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I kind of want it to look nice. There we go. So that's how it looks. I stitched it, I fixed it, so it looks like that there. We could show you from that side. So it looks like that. So I'm going to stitch the other side. Again, you're making it an oval shape. It doesn't have to be extremely perfect because we're going to be folding this after. But you know, as nice as you can get it. And that's how that side looks. So see how it's stitched there? That's how it looks. Now we need to, hang on, trim this oval away. So I'm going to use my pinking shears, and I'm going to trim this oval away. And I'm using pinking shears just because it is a curved edge, and I just want it to turn nicer. Careful not to clip those stitches that you just made. See, we have a cute little oval that we cut out. Now remove your clips. We're going to turn everything right sides out. So see how that cinches that in the center there? it made it go in the center, it made it cinch in the center. We're going to turn everything right sides out, and we're going to press these edges where the seam is together, because we're going to top stitch the short ends. And I'm just adding some clips. So we'll top stitch these short ends together, and you want to press your seams open here so that everything is nice and flat. There we go. I'm going to make sure it's like that on the other side too. So I've just pressed those seams open just to help get everything nice and flat, and I think it is on this side. Well, one was turned one way, one was pushed the other way, so that's okay. I've nested them here. Instead of having them pushed open, they've nested. So that means one seam goes to the left, one seam goes to the right. There we go. So now we're going to top stitch these short ends. So change to your favorite top stitch length and top stitch across. Trim all your threads. Return your stitch length. Now, or actually you can leave your stitch length long, we need to stitch these long edges together. So I'm going to clip the long edges together. So we're clipping these together and sewing it together because part of the bag is birthed and then another part of the bag is bound. So the binding on this area here is what's going to conceal these raw edges. So the base of the bag is going to be bound and the top of the bag is birthed. So it's kind of nice because you get to learn, if you've never done a binding method, you get to learn it here. Did I say birthing or binding method? Oh man, I feel bad. If you haven't done a binding method, you get to learn it. If you haven't done a birthing method, you get to learn it. It's really a personal preference on which one you like best. I do like both. I do find birthing is a bit, not a bit more work, but I find it takes sometimes a bit more work, I guess, than binding. Binding takes a bit more work because you have binding. I guess in the end it's the same. But I like binding because it does add a sort of skeleton to the bag, so it helps create a structure and holds the bag. So I do like binding for that reason. I like birthing because I do find, for me, it's faster once you get everything sewn together, because here you're not sewing this together, you would sew it together. So it is sort of faster, and I just find then I'm done the bag, I birth it, and I'm done. I close up my turning hole. It's just really a personal preference on what you prefer. Dropping these clips. So I'm just basting these together within the seam allowance, and I'm using a long stitch length because, again, this is basting, so all this is doing is holding all these layers together. So it's all held together. And again, that's because we're going to be binding this. So I'm just trimming all my threads, and I'm even going to trim these little threads here, so giving this a little haircut on the edges. Sometimes this happens where we need to give it a little bit of a haircut. You just want to get rid of any of the threads that are going to peek out later. You don't want them peekabooing on your finished bag. See how much I got off there? There we go. So now that this is all done, return your stitch length back to the length you used for stitching your bag. That's how the side looks. It's really neat, isn't it, for how it's going to be finished. I really like it. It's really interesting. So that's how that looks. So now we're going to place this to the side. We're going to create our handle. So just put that off to the side. And our handle is right here. So this is your handle or your shoulder bag strap. So if you want it longer, there is a method for making it longer to make it a crossbody bag if you want to wear this as a crossbody bag. I'm just going with the shoulder strap. So this is the shoulder strap length that's given in the pattern. So now what we're going to do is you need to take the entire length of the strap and you need to draw a line down the center of the strap. Then we're going to apply some double-sided tape on the wrong side to both sides of the marked line. So double-sided tape. Off there. I want to stay as close to the center line as I can. All right. Just pressing the tape down, making sure it's stuck down. So now we're going to remove the double-sided tape, paper backing, and we're going to fold the long edges in to meet the center line. So fold them into the center. I'm just folding along, putting it to the center, just like that. Press it down and repeat that on the other side. So for this, normally I would say don't have them touch in the center because we'd be folding it again, but we are not for this style of handle. So these edges can touch in the center. Oops. Go. Now we need to grab our O-rings. And we're going to slide them onto our handle. So just like that, you want them on the handle. Then we're going to take this and we're going to place it right sides together. So those folded edges are facing out. You want to open this up. So you're going to remove your paper, your double-sided tape a little bit because you don't want to stitch over that. So I've just picked back the double-sided tape. So open up these edges. I'm going to peel back my double-sided tape. I'll add more again if I can. reuse that, I will though. So I'm just pulling the double-sided tape down. I just don't want to stitch over it because that can gum up your needle. So make sure that you're going right sides together and that it's not twisted. Clip the short ends together. And then sew this using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So again, make sure your double-sided tape is out of the way. Didn't want it sticking to the bed of my machine or gumming up my needle when you sew right on it. And my scissors are, there we go. I didn't think I'd be able to reach them. Now we're going to open up this seam. And I'm just going to pull this double-sided tape right off and just reuse it, or use new one. So we're going to open up this seam and we're going to top stitch on each side of that seam using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So increase your length to your top stitch length. Trim your threads. And I'm just going to trim the corners a little bit. That just helps reduce some of the bulk there when I go to fold this in. And I'll show you what I mean. So I just trim those corners just like that. Now I'm going to grab some double-sided tape again, and I'm going to tape this down because we need to refold. So this is all folded together again. So I'm just going to place my double-sided tape again and refold it all in. Make sure that center seam lines up when you're refolding it. So the center seams all line up. Just like that. And now we need to find, so taking the center here, oh, there's some threads that I need to trim. So we know that this is the center here where this seam is, but now we want to find the center down here, and this is important because of the next steps. So I'm just going to fold it, because what we're going to do is the same thing we did with the base, which is make that mark and sew it. So I'm just marking the center here. So you can see I've just drawn it with my chalk, so I know that that's the end and that's the end. So here's the folded edge here, and then all the way over, and I know that's the folded edge there. So that's what I want. Now we're going to take this and we're going to place them right sides together. And again, we're going to do the same thing just like we did on the base. And I just want to make sure we're doing it. I'm giving you the right instructions. Except for this time, we're actually not going to be sewing on these folded edges on the outside here. We're going to be sewing or making our mark on the edge where those raw edges are. So you're going to be measuring over on that edge here, so that not where, you see how I have it where the seam is? That's the side where we're measuring and marking and we'll be sewing. So I'm going to go off camera, I'm going to make all those marks, and then I'll come back and we will stitch it. All right, so I've made those marks using the measurements given in the pattern, and oh yeah, you can see it. So you can see it there. That's the center seam, and then I've measured over from the center seam using the measurement given in the pattern. Now I'm going to stitch that exactly as we did for the base. the exact same way. There's one side done. Now I'm going to do the other side. Sorry, my chair is squeaking because it's rubbing on my table. And again, if your machine is struggling going over that bulk there, that's from the center seam, because where it was all stitched together, use a humper jumper or whatever you need to get over that thickness there, the bulk. Now, we're going to trim away that center just like we did previously. And I'm just trying to be careful because I don't want to trim any further than I'm going to cut those threads later. I don't want to trim any further than where I've stitched, so I'm just being careful to make sure I point my scissors away from the handle. Trim all your threads. So that's how it looks once we open it up and we fold it back on its seam. There is quite a bit of bulk there. Oh, and I broke a clip. So we're just clipping it on the seam for now because we're going to move those O-rings, but I just want to get everything all turned. So I'm going to slide one O-ring up to where that seam is. So you want them on each end. Match up the sides. Make sure everything's all lined up. And then flatten it out. It's a really nice strap. I really like this. I'm really quite enjoying this technique. Now you may want to switch to a zipper foot. I don't know why I keep breaking all my orange clips. You may want to switch to a zipper foot. You know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to add some double-sided tape in the center just to help hold everything together. So you may want to switch to a zipper foot for this so that you can get nice and close to your hardware without stitching over it. And Kristen does say that you can add rivets, which I will later. I won't do that now because I'm not sure if I'm going to be adding rivets to other parts of the bag. So I just kind of like to do it all at one time, which actually we are. I know when we get to the end we are. So I'll just wait and add them then, rather than stopping the camera right now and going off to do that. So I just added some double-sided tape in the center. That's just going to help hold my handle so it doesn't shift on me. I'll still use clips to help hold everything in place. Look at how pretty that strap looks. That's so pretty. And the nice thing about it is there's no raw edges here on your strap at all. Everything's all concealed. You have no raw edges at all. And your hardware is tucked in. You don't have to fold over your hardware because your hardware is all tucked in to the center of the strap here, in between the folds. So I will switch to a zipper foot, or no, I should be okay with that one because I'm going to add rivets anyways, so I'll be okay. So we're going to stitch down the one long edge, across the bottom here, across this long edge, and then across this bottom again. And I'm actually going to start at one of these edges under the hardware so that I can back stitch there. And this way here I can back stitch on the other end as well. something's not lining up quite right, so I'm just going to adjust. I feel like something's not lining up right. I think I don't have this totally lined up correctly. Like, fold. There we go. I just want everything nice and perfect. Normally I wouldn't peel apart double-sided taped edges, but it's inside here, so if it peels apart a bit of my vinyl, it's okay because nobody will ever see that. Sometimes double-sided tape is strong and it can damage your vinyls, so you want to be very careful when you're using double-sided tape, and you use it only where you're not going to be peeling it back like I'm doing here. Like I said, I'm doing this because it's in between layers, so it's not going to ever be seen. I'm just trying to make this really pretty and perfect. There we go. All right, I'm not going to add these clips. I don't need them. Now I'm going to top stitch this, and as I mentioned, I'm going to start under the hardware so that I can back stitch. And I'm going to hand crank because, as you just heard, my machine didn't sound very happy there. So I will hand crank. And then I'm going to back stitch to get past my hardware so my presser foot can fit. I thought I was going to break a needle. I kind of jumped back there. All right, coming back up to that end. And I'm going to hand crank here again because that bulk right there. And I'm only back stitching just so it matches on both ends. I just like my strap to be symmetrical. So if I've back stitched there, I like to back stitch, oops, on both ends. Just getting, and the reason why I went backwards there was so that I could get past the hardware and it wouldn't cause any issues with my presser foot. And then here I am back at the top again. And I'm just back stitching a couple times just to really get those stitches locked in. And then pull my threads. Snip my threads. Make sure any threads anywhere are cut. And that is how your strap looks when you're done. Isn't it pretty? Such a beautiful strap. I really like it. It's so pretty. And again, I'm going to be adding rivets here, so I'm not really concerned about how close I got to my hardware. But if you don't have rivets, you'll want to switch to a zipper foot and get nice and close to your hardware. So that is how your strap looks when it's done. And I like the ends. It's really pretty the way that is. So I'm just going to hang my strap off to the side. Now we're going to continue on. And before we continue on, if you want to use a crossbody strap, you can definitely use a crossbody strap, and the instructions are given in the pattern, and I'll link below in the description for instructions for how to make a strap. And it's a tutorial that I made for if a pattern calls for webbing and you don't have webbing and you want to make straps. So I will link that below, as well as a link to finishing the edges to get nice edges on the ends of your straps. So now we need to move on to our lining assembly. So for this piece, we need our lining piece B, the bag bottom, and you need to mark your centers, and to do that you fold it in half, lining up these bottom curved edges, and then you mark your centers. And you want to do that on all your B pieces. I've already gone ahead and done that, so please go ahead and do that, and you'll mark the top and the bottom centers just like that. You'll see it there, my little marks. So you'll do that. Now on the bottom of this piece, you're going to measure from the bottom up, and you're going to make a mark, and you can see my line there, and that's for where your slip pocket is going to go. So we want to have the slip pocket centered, so I'm just going to create that crease because I didn't make it all the way up, and you want to place the slip pocket on here centered. Sorry, didn't mean to drop that and be so loud. So I'm just folding my slip pocket in half as well, and I'm going to line it up with that mark I made at the bottom here, centering it, and then I'm going to use clips to help hold it in place, or pins, sorry, not clips, these are pins. Didn't go through all the way. So I've just got some pins there to help hold it in place. Now we're going to sew the sides, bottom, and up the other side. So down one side, across the bottom, and up the other side, and back stitch. So you can divide this pocket, she says, after if you want, and you can also add some Chicago screws or rivets here at the seams in order to help give it some extra strength. I'm just going to back stitch at that seam. So really back stitch here, because this is where it gets a lot of stress, is at the top of the pockets. And I'm just stitching down that pocket. And remember, we folded the edges of the slip pocket in, so that means that those side edges are finished. There's no raw edges. And when we're stitching this down, we're holding those raw edges in place and keeping everything sealed in. So I'm coming back up to the top here. I'm going to back stitch. There we go. I've back stitched a few times at both top corners just to help really give that some extra strength there, because we do cause a lot of stress when we're going in and out of a pocket. So there it is. That's the slip pocket all installed. And remember, I said I wanted this so that this cheetah here was facing up, or leopard. There you go. Now we need to attach our recessed zipper panel to this same panel that we've just attached our slip pocket to. So you'll take your recessed zipper panel and you're going to place it so it is right sides up. So you're looking at the exterior, and the lining of the recessed zipper panel is touching the lining of your bottom B piece. And you want to line up those centers. And if you hadn't made your center marks, you'll want to go ahead and do that now. So make all your center marks as given in the pattern. So you fold your recessed zipper panel in half and you make the mark in the center, and same thing for this lining panel. Fold it in half, lining up those rounded edges, and then make your center marks. So we're clipping this in place all the way across, just like that, and I've lined up my center marks. So it looks just like that. So again, it's exterior side up, lining and lining are touching, and we're going to base this in place using the seam allowance given in the pattern. Now we need to grab our top A piece, and that's one of these pieces, and you want to pay attention to the pattern for how this is placed when it is placed on top. So you see this little side here that has this little edge, that's where our handle is going to connect after. You want that to be on the same side as your zipper tail. And we're lining up the top of A and top of B here. We're lining up those top corners. So on the left side, those top corners will line up, but on this side, you'll have it off a bit. So it hangs off just a little bit on this edge. And that's right. I'm going to need to take my sweater off. I'm getting a little warm here. So next time I pause the camera, I'll take it off. So now we're going to stitch this in place using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And just make sure that zipper tail doesn't try to get under your needle. You don't want to sew through that. Cut your threads. Now we're going to fold back the top of bag A piece and top stitch through all the layers and the seam allowance. And so you're folding it this way and we're top stitching the side of the seam here. So I just want to make sure that I'm telling you where to top stitch. Yeah, so you're folding it up and those layers are going to be under the A piece and you're top stitching on top of A. So you'll see the layers are here. When I pull back top A, I fold it back, but those layers stay under A. So that's where we're top stitching, is on top of A. And all the bulk is under A. So top stitch this seam all the way along. Cut your threads. And then you want to cut these little areas here that are coming off. You want to cut those so that everything is flush. You want to trim those little peaks off, those little points off, just like that. So now I have no more points, and that's how that looks right now. So we're going to put this panel off to the side for now. So we have lots of stuff off to the side. And we're going to grab our remaining lining panel, so right here. And again, if you haven't, fold it in half so you get that center seam. You want that center seam. Then take your zipper pocket G piece and place it right sides down. And again, fold this in half to get your center seam because you want it to be centered on the panel. So fold it in half, that creates a crease to get that center seam, and line up the centers. So I'm just checking to make sure that all my centers are lined up. And then you're pinning it at the top here. So you're clipping it at the top. And then I'm going to add some pins down here to make sure that this doesn't move on me. And now what you need to do, if you haven't already, is you need to draw this rectangle on the zipper G piece using the measurements given in the pattern. So you can see I've already made mine. So if you haven't, please go ahead and make yours. I've returned my stitch length back to my length I used for stitching a bag. And now I'm going to stitch this along the rectangle I drew. And again, if you don't want angled stitches or you're worried about getting angled stitches, you can reduce your stitch length in that corner, take one stitch. Always make sure your needle is down before you move, by the way, or before you take that, change your stitch length. And then do that in all the corners. Take one stitch, return your stitch length back to the length you use for stitching. Get to the next corner, take one stitch, return your stitch length back. Now we're going to cut down the center of this opening. And my doorbell rang, so I'm just going to go answer it. Sorry about that, I just needed to get the door. So Missy's here to visit. So now I've started that hole that I cut to cut open the zipper opening here. Excuse me. Sorry, you gotta get off. There we go. So now we're going to cut that the same way we cut that pocket for the front foam pocket. We're going to cut it the same way with the V's going into the corner. Just had a little sneeze. Hey, you just had a little sneeze. And we're going to cut that. Now we're going to press this pocket and turn it right sides to the wrong side, just like we did on the previous piece, like we did on that cell phone pocket. Somebody's wanting some attention. I wish you could hear her purring. Right, Missy Bear? Hey. Right, Missy Bear? Oh, you got to get off that. So I'm turning this so that they are wrong sides together. Wrong sides together. Watch out. Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out. So that they're going to be wrong sides together. Then I'm going to take this to my iron and give it a really good press. Same thing we did with that cell phone pocket. So you're going to press it, and then we will install the zipper pocket after. So I'm going to take this to my iron, give it a really good press, and then I'll come back and we will continue on. All right, so I've pressed it to the wrong side. To the wrong side. Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out, Miss Bear. I've pressed it to the wrong side, so it looks like this from the right side and that from the wrong side, just like we did when we did that cell phone pocket. Now we need to use some double-sided tape, so I'm just going to place this off to the side for now. We need our zipper. Are you trying to get my clips? We need our zipper for our zipper pocket. Hey, 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 I need that. Oh, you're playful. So I'm going to put some double-sided tape on the long edges of my zipper. Thank you for the kisses. Thank you. Nope, that's for me, not for you. Oh, watch the lights. No, you're going to sit right on that piece, aren't you? Of course. Of course you are. You want to sit on this? Want to sit on that? You want that? You want that? Go have a nap. There you go. Go have a nap. So I've put the double-sided tape on both sides of the zipper. I need this. You're just going to have to go on there. Go. So now we're going to place the zipper inside the zipper opening. So remove the double-sided tape. Now I'm just going to look and see if she tells you which way your pull should be going. Facing the left when closed. So you want it going to the left when closed. And we're going to center this, the teeth inside the zipper opening. Okay? She's going to go get into something over there now. You didn't want that, eh? Just moving this back so it doesn't fall on me. So it's centered in the opening just like that. So now we're going to top stitch all around that opening. So you're going to top stitch all around that opening. What are you doing? I'm going to move this over here so you don't keep poking yourself with it. And here you can back stitch if you want. You can also pull the threads through and tie them off. The choice is really yours. I'm just back stitching because it is a busy print. Hey, leave that alone. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. She's getting into things. She doesn't often come up on the table, but she's been coming up a lot lately. Or asking to come up. And so everything's new and exciting to her up here. Where my industrial machine is, she can easily get onto that table, so she doesn't really need to ask too much. She just jumps up on the couch and then climbs up that way. But this one, she asks because I guess she's nervous about jumping. Anyways, enough about Missy. Now we're going to flip this so it is wrong sides up. So you see the wrong side of this panel right now, and we're going to bring the zipper pocket up to meet the top. keeps giving me kisses. Yes. Up to meet the top, so those short raw edges meet. Thank you. Thank you. That's very nice. Lots of purring, eh? That's not food. No, no, no. Don't take the clip. Hey, you little bugger. No. So there we go. We have it clipped. Now we're going to sew all the way around, making sure to keep that bottom panel out of the way. So we're going to sew up the side, across the top here, and down the other side, using the seam allowance given in the pattern. What are you doing? She jumped down, so she won't be in the way so much anymore. And I do backstitch in those corners. Not necessary on this so much, but I just find it adds some extra strength in the corners when I backstitch. And my threads got sucked up. I can move this back. And there we have it. Our zipper pocket is now installed. So now we need to repeat the same thing for that zipper gusset that we did with the panel previously. So you need to have it so that the zipper gusset is on top. And before you do that, what you're going to do is you're going to place it, and then what we'll do is line up the center marks. So line up all those center marks, and then we will check it. So making sure that the zipper will close in the same direction so that they line up the same way when we place these panels together, just like that. So they do. The zipper goes the same way. So the tails hang off on the same side when you place this together. And that's what you want. So now we're going to baste this in place, and I have a feeling it's off a little bit. I'm just going to check it with the other panel. No, we're good. I just want to make sure it's the same. Nothing shifted on me. Something just seemed a little off. All right, so basting this in place. Oh, my foot fell off. Basting it in place all the way across. Now we need to grab our remaining lining A top piece. And this is again where you need to pay attention to which way this piece goes, because it's different when it's on this piece. Last time it was at the same, this curved edge here was on the same side as the tail. This time it's on the opposite side. So again, lining up those edges, clip it all the way across. Uh-oh, she's coming back. Can hear her bells. I'm going to move this in case she jumps up. So we're going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Just slid my zipper out of the way there just because I felt like it was sort of not getting in my way, but I didn't want to hit it while I'm sewing because it is dangly. And I'm just going over my seam because I realized when I moved my zipper it kind of made me go off a bit. So now same thing, press top A up, and then all that bulk is going to be underneath, and we're going to top stitch on top of A. So same thing we did with the previous one. just moving my zipper pull out of the way because it is dangly. I don't want to accidentally hit it. And then we'll trim those edges, same thing we did on the previous panel, trimming those edges. And then that's how that one looks. So we have our zipper pocket here underneath our recessed zipper panel. We have a zipper pocket, we have a slip pocket, everything is all done. Now we're going to put this one to the side because we need to construct our exteriors. So take your exteriors and same thing, fold them in half so that you get the center markings, which I have already done. I've done all the center markings. You're going to take the one panel, place it, so B panel, place it right sides up, and then we need to fold it up out of the way as you sew this pocket piece. So take the one with the pocket piece with top A and place it right sides together. Same thing we did with the lining, lining up that side. Make sure that pocket piece is up, flipped down out of the way when we go to sew this. We don't want to sew with that pocket piece. And again, we know that we've got it correct because when I look at the picture in the pattern, it looks like this. So I'm going to sew this using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So I just want to make sure I'm using the right seam allowance. Yep. I had to read to find the seam allowance. All right, so using the seam allowance given in the pattern, making sure you're using your stitch length that you like to use for stitching a bag together, making sure that pocket is out of the way because we don't want to sew over it. And it is a bit bulky there, so if your machine has a hard time getting past where your phone here is in the way, your pocket, you can use a zipper foot. That'll help you get close without sewing over it. Now we're going to fold top A up, again keeping that pocket piece out of the way, and I'm just going to cut this tape here because it is in the way and I don't want to sew over it, so I'm going to cut some of this tape off. I put it a little too close, forgot about the seam allowances. So I just cut the tape so it's not going to be in that seam allowance. Fold this up and top stitch on top of A. And I just want to make sure again that I'm telling you the right thing. Yes, so you're folding this up. So when A is down like this, we just fold it up and then all this seam is under A here. So you can see it goes up under A. That's what I mean every time I say fold it up. And now we're going to top stitch on top of A, just like we did on the lining panels. Make sure you keep that flap out of the way and keep your pocket out of the way too. You don't want to stitch through either of those. And we'll do the same thing, trim those little points. Just tried to stick those to the machine, but that's how that looks. That's one done. Now we're going to place this one off to the side for now, and we're going to repeat that all for this final panel, which has nothing attached to it. So just flip it around, line it up, clip it together. And my center marks are aligned too. That's the other thing. You want to make sure that all those center marks line up. And then we're going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. I don't want to use the right stitch length. And I'm not stitching over my interfacing. I forgot to mention that last time, but I'm not stitching over my interfacing. I'm stitching just above it. stitch length adjusted, and then fold this up. Something about this reminds me of a Smurf. And top stitch on top. We're actually almost done our bag. It's really a fairly quick sew, which I really like. So this would be great if you have, you know, a day before and you're like, oh, I want to make a bag for somebody that looks like, you know, it took a lot of work and can make a really big statement. This would be the bag to make because it's such a unique looking bag. Doesn't require a lot of hardware, which is awesome. And in the pattern, if you use a crossbody strap, Kristen does mention that you can use rectangle rings, but you could even use rectangle rings even for this if you really wanted, or D-rings if you wanted. So you could really just change this up to make it how you really want it to be and to be your own. Now we're going to start putting it all together. This is exciting. So now we need to take one of our exterior and place it right sides up, and one of our lining pieces. So I just want to see which one Kristen places together. I'm going to put the zipper pocket with this one. So we're going to clip it together. And you want to pay special attention to this seam here where the bottom and tops meet, and clip there. So pay special attention to that seam because that's very important. And then clip the rest of the way around. So you may be thinking, but Michelle, you said we were going to be doing binding. We are. But right now, what we're doing is we're doing this part where it's going to be turned right sides out, and it's going to be birthed on this part. Because we don't want to bind the outside of the bag. We just want to have the binding on the inside of the bag. So it's all clipped. Everything is clipped in place. All right, so here's where we need to really paying attention. Starting at the bottom side seam on the top of the exterior panel, so on here, you're going to start at the edge on an angle and sew until you get to the seam allowance given in the pattern. So starting here, right here, on the top of the bottom here, right where this seam is, you're going to start there and veer to the seam allowance given in the pattern. Then you're going to go all the way around, come down here, and then when you get to here, you're going to start veering until you get to where the top of the bottom panel is there. So you want to veer to the seam allowance given in the pattern. So starting at the top corner here, I'm just going to place a clip there because it's shifting on me. I'm just going to go over that. And then now I'm at my seam allowance. So I'm going to keep following my seam allowance all the way around. Now normally I would use a thread that matches my exterior here because it's white. However, I'm okay with the blue that might show when we turn this right sides out. Sometimes it causes stress on the seams, and sometimes you can see a thread. So I often try to use, when it's white, a white thread. Oh, here comes Missy. You can hear her coming because she's got a bell on her collar. Sometimes we don't hear her at all. She's stealthy. All right, so I'm coming back down to where this seam is here, and I'm going to veer off the end. So you just veer off the end. You end up going with a smaller seam allowance, and you can see here how I did that. So see how I veered off? And I went all the way around using my seam allowance given in the pattern. So now we're going to snip into the seam all the way around the top. This just makes it easier for turning right sides out. I'm going to use pinking shears. I'm going to trim the seam down. just trimmed it where the curves are, but I see a point here where I kind of shifted wrong, so I'm just going to clean that up. I just don't want it to be wonky there. So now we're going to turn this around. So turning this right sides out. And I'm just rolling it with my fingers just to get it out right now. And then take my turning tool. And I'm just rolling it with my fingers again. See what I mean? I don't know if you can see it on camera, but it kind of shows the blue stitching, which I think is kind of cool looking a little bit when I press on the seams. Okay, and look at how that lines up nicely there. So now I'm going to place some clips because we need to top stitch all around that finished edge. Ow. There we go. So now we're going to top stitch that finished edge, but we're also going to baste these raw edges together after. So I'm going to start with top stitching my finished edge first, and then I'll focus on basting this edge. And you want to make sure your zipper is clipped out of the way so you don't sew over it. So I'm just clipping it to itself. And then we repeat the same thing for the remaining exterior and lining panel. So I'm going to change my length to my top stitch length. Excuse me, I'm just going to take a drink. Hi, you're back. Uh-oh. And I'm going to start by hand cranking first because that is a lot of bulk. I just don't want to get any skip stitches, so I always hand crank when I know there's a bit of bulk. You can do the same thing. It just helps prevent skip stitches. Sometimes I have to rock my needle back a bit, and that just helps make sure that those stitches get caught. All right, we're in the clear. Just that seam has quite a bit of bulk there. So I'll have to remember that when I'm doing my binding too, that there may be some bulk. She's in a bit of a playful mood today. Are you back? I'm just going to remove these clips. Hi. She's bugging at me down here on the floor. trimming that thread, and I'm coming up to the area again where there's all that bulk. So I'm going to hand crank just to make sure I don't get any skip stitches or run into any issues. All right, let's see how it looks. That's how that looks when that's top stitched. That's the right side, that's the wrong side. Now I'm going to base stitch, oops, this all together. I better move that in case Missy comes up on the table. As we saw, she likes to steal my clips. And I'm basting this all together. I'm just going around. And you may be wondering why I'm doing this from the wrong side. Sometimes I find my vinyl tends to shift on me under my foot, and I just find going this way helps hold it down. There we go. Done. There we go. It is basted together. Now we're going to repeat that whole step. So attaching everything together the way we did for this first piece. But I'm going to do that off camera because I don't feel you need to sit there and watch me do that for the second side. So I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to do that on the second side, and then I'll come back and we will continue on with making our bag. All right, so both my exteriors are done. I've top stitched the tops of A and I've basted the bottoms together. Now we need to put it all together. So you need to take your base. We need to find the center first of all, if you haven't already, which I haven't. So I'm going to find my center. Oh, if you could see this cart over here, it's a mess. So finding my center. I'm going to clip these together because they keep shifting on me. All right, so clip that. And then mark the center edges. Now we're going to take this and we'll start with the piece here that has our foam pocket on it. And we're going to clip the centers together. So find your center mark on your panel and your center mark on your, right here, you can see it there. So line up the centers at the bottom of the base. And clip it around. And the top of the base should align with the top line of top stitching on the exterior across the front of the bag. So it should align with the top stitching here. So I'm going to continue pinning it all the way around. So my top stitching line there, that's where the base lines up with. And again, we have no interfacing here in these seams, so that's going to help your base when you're stitching everything together, especially when we go to do the binding. Another thing you may want to do is you may want to snip into your curves so that everything lines up and stays lined up, and when you snip into the curves it'll stay lined up and it'll help the panel, the base panel, open up so it goes around that curve nicely. So snipping in the base panel within the seam allowance will help get a nice curve there. So I'll add a few snips into the curve, just within the seam allowance. then we're going to sew all around using the seam allowance given in the pattern. And here there's a lot of bulk, so I'm going to do the same thing I've done previously, and I'm going to hand crank that area. It's always best to hand crank if you have a little bit of bulk. I'm going to sew all the way around this curve, making sure I keep the fabrics nice and flat. Make sure that zipper tail is out of the way as well. You don't want to sew over it. And I'm just following the curve of the bag. And I'm hand stitching here because I don't want to have any skip stitches. Hand cranking here. See, it's a bit thick there. So now that I know that, I'll remember that for when we're adding our binding at the top, because that's a lot of bulk there. I'm sure my machine could get through it. I just don't want to push it and cause a needle to break. And I just tied off my threads. Now I'm just going to trim. She says to trim to make sure everything is even, and I only have to trim this little bit here. Everything else is pretty even. Turn it out to make sure you have no puckers. We have this beautiful bag so far. No puckers. Absolutely beautiful. Now we're going to repeat that to attach the second side. Just making sure we weren't doing binding first. Sometimes we do the binding first and then attach a second side. So I just wanted to make sure I follow the pattern as the instructions are written. So there's my center. I'm lining up my center marks. Clip it in place, and I'll do the same thing. I'll make those snips all the way along the seam. Lining up the top stitching with the top edge of the base panel. I'll line it all up, clipping it all the way around, making sure everything stays lined up. All the way around the curve, snip into the seam as well. I'm just going to pause the camera and continue clipping, and I'll continue all the way around the edge, and then I'll make the snips, and then I'm going to sew all the way around this just as we did previously. I don't feel like you need to sit and watch me. It's the same steps, and then I'll come back and we will attach our binding. All right, so the bag is all attached and it's raw edged right now because we're going to be using some binding. So you'll grab your binding, and I have some pre-made binding here that I purchased, and I just want to make sure my thread matches, which it does. Just going to pull it off this cardboard. So first we need to take our binding and we need to fold it so that the top edge here will be finished. So fold it down. So bring it and fold it down. You don't want any raw edges on your binding. Now, Kristen also says an alternative method is to use some grosgrain ribbon. So if you have ribbon, you can use that instead of your binding. You can use ribbon, you can use fold over elastic. It really depends, but you want to encase that raw edge. You don't want any raw edges showing. So I'm just going to add a clip. Now this is how I do my binding, and you may have a method that you find works best for you. Please use the method that you find works best for you if this method is not a method you like. So I like to take it, and this is the side I put against the bed of my machine. So the panel B will be against the bed of my machine, and I'll be sewing around on this side. So what I do is I place double-sided tape around the edge, right along the raw edge. And I did turn out my bag to make sure everything was good, and it was. It looks absolutely beautiful. It is a nice gusset. It fit perfectly. We had no issues, and I'm just cutting threads here if you're wondering what I'm doing. I had no issues with puckering. I have a beautiful base so far, hopefully. When I sew my binding on. Sometimes when I sew my binding on, I don't know what happens, but sometimes I get little puckers. Not the end of the world. So I'm just really making sure that this is pressed down. Now I'm going to remove the paper just a bit, and I'm going to stand up. So now what I'm going to do is fold my binding over the edge, and I'm making sure the middle of the binding is hitting that raw edge of the bag. So the middle of the binding is hitting the edge of the bag. And you want to make sure it's folded over on this side. Add a clip there so that it doesn't move on you, and just keep placing the binding all the way around. And what this double-sided tape is doing on this side is, you'll notice it's holding it in place for me so that it doesn't shift. Oh, I have a knot. How did that happen? It's holding it in place for me so it doesn't shift when I go to sew my binding. And you could have a lot of fun with your binding. You can use something totally contrasting. I just went with blue because the rest of my bag is blue with white and this beautiful jungle print. And this needs to just be trimmed just a little bit. So now I'm at the end where my binding is up here on the end, and I need to repeat that for folding it over onto, so that I don't have, a raw edge. So I'm just going to trim it a little bit more. So I need to get that so that there's no raw edge here at the top of my binding. So I'm going to measure where it is so I know that that is a good place. So I'm using my bag as a guide. So I'm going to fold that binding over. And just finger pressing it. Take your time with this. Don't rush this step. Trust me, you don't want to rush this step. It's not worth rushing. It's worth having a beautiful bag in the end. And I'm just pushing those raw edges down as well from the binding. So you won't see any raw edges at all. They will all be concealed within the binding. So now I'm going to place some clips all the way around on this side. And sometimes I add some double-sided tape on this side too, just so that I don't have to use clips. But to save on double-sided tape, I'm going to just clip it in place. Again, I like that we're learning both techniques with this bag. So again, if you haven't done binding before, you get to do some binding here. And it's really nice because it's not super sharp, like it's not like a curve, like a circle bag. Sometimes the binding can be a little bit tricky on a circle bag, some people find, but it's nice because it's just 2 little curves here, and you get to learn how to do your binding and you get to practice it. And you know what I'm going to say is, if your binding is not perfect, don't sweat it. It's okay, because you know what? It's inside the bag. Once the bag is all filled, no one's going to see that. They're just going to see the exterior of your bag. If they look inside the bottom of your bag, they're not going to pull out your bag and look at your binding and make sure it's all perfect and your stitching is neat, because trust me, mine never is, and nobody ever knows because nobody sees that part of the bag really, especially once it's all filled. We're always our harshest critics. We're always the hardest on ourselves. Other people do not see what we see when we look at our bags. So just remember, you made the bag. You should be proud of it because you made a beautiful bag. So now I'm going to grab out my extension table because I don't want this falling over as I'm sewing. So that's how we do the one side. That's how you attach the binding on the one side. So I'm going to increase my stitch length just a little. And I'm going to start at the top here. And I am going to give myself a thread tail to begin with, just to make it easier when I'm snipping those threads later. And I'll start, press our foot down. And I am hand cranking here, just like I did before. And I'm back stitching a lot at the top here. I just really want to make sure it catches because there is a lot of bulk there. Remember, that's where you have your exterior and your lining and your top A, and then there's all those seams there, so it's naturally going to be a little bit bulky. I can't move my chair forward. Just keep sewing all the way along. Try to make sure everything stays nice and flat, or as flat as you can keep it. You can use a stiletto here to help hold your fabrics. And again, if you are someone who has done binding before and you have a method that you prefer to use, feel free to use that method. This is just a guide in the pattern for everyone to use, and if you're a newbie, it's great to have the instructions because then you learn how to do it. But if you're experienced, you've probably already done binding. So you may have a method that you like to use when you're doing binding, because we all have that, something that we're used to doing. So for example, some of us have a different way of using zipper pockets. So if we purchase a pattern, it may have instructions for how to put a zipper pocket in, but we may have a method that we prefer to use, and that's okay. Just want to push this over a little bit. There we go. And so I'm going to hand crank here because this is the bulk, and I did tighten my presser foot tension. I may need to loosen it off here because it might be too tight. It's sort of getting stuck. Maybe not. Now I'm going to back stitch. I just want to keep this out of the way. I know it's hard to see what I'm doing. I'm using my elbow to help hold things out of the way while I hold my reverse stitch lever. And I'm sure I could have stitched here, but I don't want to use, I would rather hand crank than use my presser foot. And because when you're hand cranking, you can feel when there's something sort of, when you're going through, if there's bulk and it's hitting bulk and it's not going through. When you're hand cranking, you can kind of maneuver it, so you can move your fabric, you can lift up your presser foot, you can shift the fabric around. But when you're sewing with your pedal, you don't have that option, so your machine can get jammed and break a needle and even potentially cause damage to your machine. So there's my threads. I'm just going to pull them out. I have a beautiful bound bag all the way around. Actually, I think this is probably the best binding I've ever done. How is that even possible? There's the binding. It's seriously the best binding I've ever done. Again, I've done this one other time on another bag and it was the best binding ever, and here we are again. I don't know how I did that. I'll probably never repeat that process again. So there it is. You have it all bound, all nicely bound on one side. So now we're going to repeat that for the second side. So I'm going to go off camera and I'm going to bind the second side, because I don't feel you need to sit and watch me do it a second time, because that's just going to make the tutorial a little too long and a little too boring for you. So I'll go off camera, I'll do that, and then I'll come back and we will add our handle and add our rivets, which I will have to go off camera to add the rivets. I won't stay on camera for that, but I'll show you how to do it, and then we'll add them, and then we will come back and continue on. All right, so I've turned my bag right side out. I've checked my binding, make sure it's okay, and I wanted to check my gusset to make sure that I didn't have any pleats or anything, and it's a really beautiful bottom. It fits perfectly. Everything is great. I've put clips here because I've made the marks for where my rivets are going to go when we attach the strap, and these are just here, these clips, so that I know where my O-ring will go, and I did that while I was off camera so I can make the marks for the measurements. So I'm going to show you how to put the strap on, because it's a little bit different than how you normally would. So with your bag facing you, take your handle or your strap and slide it onto the end here, and then fold this end over. Now this end here on the front of the bag, and the front of the bag is the bag with the cell phone pocket, will go towards the back. So I folded it over going towards the back. Now I'm taking my handle and I'm bringing it around, making sure it's not twisted. So it's not going to be twisted, it's going to look like that. And I'm going to slide this little strap end here back on, and this one is going to go towards the front. So I'm still looking at the front of the bag, so this side goes towards the front of the bag. Just like that, and I'm just making sure it's going to be nicely centered. I want everything to look great. So nicely centered, and it'll look like that. So this one comes towards the front of the bag, and this one comes towards the back of the bag, just like that. So you're going to see one side here when you're wearing the bag, you'll see the front, this coming over the front, but this one in the back going over the back. And I guess really if you wanted to wear this with your cell phone pocket against you, so you're not worried about somebody getting into your bag and taking your cell phone, you could. It really doesn't matter. You could also make that pocket on both sides of the bag if you wanted to, so you can repeat that on both sides. So once you have that on, you can then make your marks, measurements and marks if you want, for where your rivets are going to go, or your Chicago screws. If you don't have rivets or Chicago screws, what you could do is sew a little box with an X inside it, just right here, so that you have the same thing as having your rivets, and you've attached this, and then the X actually adds a bit of extra security within that little box so that it won't come undone. And you can just draw a square, a really nice square, and then make the X inside. So I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to add my rivets to the handles here, and also to the strap where I didn't add them earlier. I'm going to do that as well, because I did say I wanted to add them. And when I'm adding them to the handle, I'm going to avoid going through the middle here where we have that fold that we did. I'm going to avoid going through that seam because I don't want to break those stitches. So just avoid it. So I'll put them on both sides of the strap, and I'll avoid going through that seam. So I'm going to go install all my rivets, and then I'll come back and we will be all done. All right, so my rivets are all attached to my strap and to the top of the bag here. So it looks just like that. And again, if you don't have rivets, you can sew it. And I added them to my strap as well. Now we need to install our zipper and then our zipper end. So I'm going to take my zipper pull, put it on my handy zipper helper. And I do have a tutorial on my YouTube channel for how I use this. but you saw me do that. No, you didn't see me do it. Oh, yes, you did. You saw me do that already during this tutorial. I was trying to remember. So I'm going to insert the ends of the zipper tape into the zipper pull evenly. Can't get this pull off for some reason. There we go. And I'm just going to make sure that it all lines up, which it does. So everything lines up when I close it. Now I'm going to install my zipper end, and there is a method in the pattern for using a fabric one, but I'm going to use my metal one. So I need the zipper end, and the screw. I use a little bit of glue inside the metal zipper end before I put it onto, oh, glue came out. It's on my finger now. So a little bit of glue into the end, and that's just in case that screw comes out. That'll help hold it on. I have tried after the glue has dried to take them off just to see if it would come off, and it doesn't. So the glue does help hold it on. So now I always use that glue on the ends. So slide it on just like that. Slide your zipper tape in. And now we're going to screw the little screw in. Oops. I need the bigger screwdriver. There we go. All right, so now that's all attached, and that means everything is done on our bag. We can put that inside, so that's how it looks, the metal zipper end. You can just slide that inside your bag or leave it hanging out if you prefer. There's your strap all attached. We have our nice roomy interior. You have a beautiful pocket for your phone, oh, right there, and your nice roomy interior with your zipper pocket and your slip pocket, so great for keeping things organized. Tuck your tail in or leave it hang out, whatever you prefer. If you like to show off if you used a different kind of metal zipper end, or maybe you used a piece of fabric and you fussy cut it and you want to show it off. But there it is. Your Piper bag is all complete. It's ready to be taken out and shown off to the world. But before you do, don't forget to take lots of pictures and share them on social media using the hashtags given in the pattern. I hope you enjoyed sewing along with me and maybe picked up a few tips and tricks along the way. Thank you for watching. Happy sewing. Bye.